I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. This is part 2 of the video of how to make a gorgeous hollow form bead with my brand new ancient style die formers. The Queen Puabi collection of die formers is available right now on my website, jewelryartstools.com. So I'm just going to anneal. I mean, I know you all know how to anneal, but a poofy flame, you see that till it bounces back a little orange. You know, like so. Beautiful. That's all it takes. And also, take a look at this. You notice how we've gone 2 rounds, but you see how like you already see the shape? I mean, it's not done. It's going to take a couple more rounds, but it really doesn't take a whole lot. So just relax and don't get too crazy with your hammering, and these will be done before you know it. So you see, it's going to be exactly like before. Blink, blink, blink. There you go. And now we're going to anneal. And you see how my fingers are right? You just have to make sure they're out of the way so that you can hammer. And you see what I mean? It's just, you're just gradually making that form happen. So for another close-up of that exciting action, there you go. Just like that. And I'm gonna squish it again. So I'm going to anneal now, but Alexis and I were just talking off screen about how, honestly, also, if you want a more low relief design like this, you could just always stop. You know, you don't have to, if for whatever reason your design, you're like, I only want like, you know, not quite that deep of a curve. You can always just stop anywhere along the way. So here we are at 5 rounds. We're doing the same exact thing. But you notice how the little ribs are becoming like clear and defined. You know, that says to me we're pretty much almost there. So what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna go ahead and trim this just to this edge and do the last 1 or 2, you know, rounds without this, you know, sticking up around the edge. But like, you see what I'm saying? Like if you take a look at the end and everything, things are looking, you know, the shape is pretty much there. It probably just needs another round or 2 to finish it off. Also, when I cut, as per normal, Joyce Chen's, I mean, you could saw this out if you wanted, but that's max of effort and I'm not going to. So I'm just gonna do this. And I'm gonna stay a hair outside the very edge in case it sinks down in there a tiny bit more. Don't slip and cut into your piece. Or your finger. You know, that is a really excellent point. That is why Alexis is here, to point out the really important stuff. I'm going to trim a little bit more off of here. God. So you'll see I haven't cut it like every molecule away, but it's almost there. I want to leave a tiny bit in case it sinks down in there just a little bit more. But in the next round or 2, we'll see if there's anything else to trim or if we'll just sand it. Okay, but again, same old stuff. I kind of put this in place. You know, if it wiggles, you can pop it down like that. And then I just slide my fingers down and out of the way. See? See how it's getting those beautiful crisp lines in the middle and everything? So I'll probably trim a little bit more and maybe sand a little bit, and then we'll just do the last round. Another thing, Alexis very smartly pointed out that I should mention, that for setting and for stuff like this, I actually have my leather mallet untreated. In other words, I leave it with the shellac on it so that it stays nice and flat. Because if you have like an old leather mallet and it has a real like slide to it, or a 45-degree angle, as some of them get after a little time in the studio, it can be hard to kind of, because look, this is not super high precision, but you do want to, generally speaking, you know, be using a flat and hitting the top and not, you know, all over the place. So this is what I use, is I just take one of these and I don't file the end or soften the end to soften it up so that it won't leave marks. I leave it like this so that it stays nice and flat. But I mean, I'm pretty OCD. If you have a small flat hammer, it's totally fine. You don't have to like go down the road like I do. So to start back up where we left off, we've got this almost done and I've trimmed most of it, but I'm gonna take my Joyce Chens now and I'm gonna really trim everything extra. Any of that little metal that's like, you know what I mean? Making that little platform, now is time to go because we're gonna trim it a little. I'm gonna sand it a little bit so it's level, and then we're gonna put it back in the die and do one last smacking to basically make sure it's like all the way down in there and everything's nice and crisp. I mean, it looks pretty much there, but I usually do that, like that final smacking, just to make sure we have our shape just the way we want it. Now you could also file. I just do a combination of whatever I think is called for depending on the design. If it's a simple shape that I can go around my scissors, you're darn right, I'm just gonna cut it. If it's a little more complicated, you need to file, you know, whatever you need to do, just like in your normal studio activities. I mean, of course, when you cut, you have to make sure not to go too berserker and cut into your design, so you can use your own discretion. Okay, so that looks good-ish, and I'm just gonna sand the rest of it, like so, okay? And I mean, this is just your normal, just like when you're sanding a bezel flat or anything like that. You're going back and forth, around and around, until I have a nice flush surface. Uh-oh, was that your stone, Susie? Got it? Stones bounce, so. So you see how the bottom is getting nice and flush, but I have a few little areas that are kind of sticking out a tiny bit more. I think I'm just gonna grab a file and just go along there a little bit. Like I said, whatever your normal procedures are, you're just trying to get rid of that extra stuff. Sandpaper okay? Boobs. Don't let this happen to you. You see what I mean? I'm just taking off like whatever's kind of sticking out there. Because essentially, once I get both of my halves sort of sanded and the extra removed and everything looking good, then we'll go and I'll do a little demo on how to put the little nick in the end, which of course we can do that, you know, 12 different ways. We can use a flex shaft or we could just use a file, but I'll give you a little demo on my favorite method. So you see what I mean? This is what I'm looking for. You see how the edges are nice and flush, just like when you're sanding a bezel down or anything like that. So then I'm gonna build my tower of magazines, and I'm gonna give it one last smack to make sure it's all the way down in there. Okay, so just like before, I'm gonna put this in here and slide my fingers out of the way. A couple of good smacks. Okay, and it really looks like it didn't hardly go down in there anymore because it's done. In other words, it's got, look at that cute little shape. It's all pretty. So these are designed so that you have a little extra room at the top to sand this down. So in other words, if I look at this here and you take a look at the top, if you take this piece and sand it down by about another 0.5 millimeter, just like a little bit lower than the very top edge, that's the full shape. You know, it's sunken down in there just a little bit deeper so that you have room to sand and everything. Because, you know, at the very top edge, you can sometimes get, you know, that's the technical term. Just like a bezel or whatever, you're always leaving a little extra so that you can clean it away. So all I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna sand this a tiny bit. We're gonna get the other one to exactly the same point, and then we'll go over to the flex shaft and I'll show you how I put a little hole in the end. So you see what I mean, how now the top edge is just a little bit lower than the top edge of the die. Basically, that's how these are designed, to give you a little room to clean up that edge, because maybe you have a little ding there, maybe you've got a little this or a little that. But let's say you say to yourself, I want mine a little fatter than Jeanette designed it. You don't have to keep sanding it down. You can let it go all the way to the top and let it be slightly fatter than the original design. I mean, that's up to you. But basically that's built in to give you a little room to clear away so that any little funny things that might have happened will disappear. Okay. So to decide where to put my holes, most of these, if you're gonna use it beads, you just want like a hole on either side. This is pretty simple. But there may be times that you decide like, oh, I want it on the side because I'm doing blah, 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 whatever. In this case, I just press the two together. They look like they fit pretty nicely, one hopes. And then I'm just gonna take a Sharpie and make a little mark and then mark the other side too, just to give me a visual guide. And see what I mean, just like that. And then I'll flip it over and do the same thing on the other side, just in case. Oops. Because normally I just start with a small little nick there or a little hole, and you can always make it bigger. So that's why I don't worry about the alignment like enormously. Like, yes, I want them roughly aligned, but usually you end up opening it a little bit more anyway. So there's 50 different ways to put a little nick into something. You can take a small little file, like a little triangular file or a little tiny round file on that end there and just make a little nick. You can use a separating disc. Separating discs are a little aggressive, so if you're not used to using a separating disc, that might be a little stressful. What I tend to use a lot are these little black discs here. They call them floppy discs, which is the stupidest name ever because as you can see, there is nothing floppy about this at all. But basically it's like hard enough, it'll grind a little nick in, but it's just not like super aggressive. But like I said, whatever you prefer is fine. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this on. You know, whenever you're using the flex shaft or the micro torque, this is one of my favorite micro torques right here, the Marathon. Just little product placement right there, love it. So normally what I do, I'm gonna turn it down a little bit, is I just hold it in my left hand like this and I line myself up because you know the most important thing anytime you're using the flex shaft or anything is just to brace yourself. If you're like trying to do stuff just like loose up in the air, you really don't have a rat's chance in hell of getting anything straight. So just always remember to use your surroundings to help you. You see what I mean? Like it cuts into it, but it's not so aggressive that it just like grinds it away. So you see that cute little nick right there? That's plenty. Flip it around. I do the same thing, and just pro tip, make sure that you notice I set myself up so that my fingers are not in the direct path of the wheel, which would seem to be, obvious. And yet sometimes when you get distracted doing other things, it's very easy to, accidentally have these things happen. Okay, see what I mean? Just like that. I'm gonna do the same thing with the other side, and then we'll start setting this up on one of those little titanium trivets. So you see, just like that. Makes that cute little nick right there. Flip it around, do the same thing on the other side. You see that? Just like that. So I have that cute little nick right there.